The practice of language assessment. Building quality system for language assessment. When we say that any product or a service is of good quality, we generally means that is constantly lives up to or is better than what we expect. For many people, a good quality car is safe and comfortable, and also start when we want it to. A good quality hotel has clean, quiet, and comfortable rooms with equipment that work well and staff who respond promptly and politely when we have a request. When thinking about buying a new product or using a new service, people often want to find out something about this quality. They may read review on website or in a magazine or ask their friends about it, or many may try using it for a short period to find out if they like it. The expectation people have of many services or product will depend partly on their needs. People look for different things in a hotel depending on whether they will stay there alone on a business trip for one night or with their family on vacation for a week. Expectations are also affected by factors such as price. People don't expect 5-star luxury in a cheap hotel, and they don't expect a small cheap car to go very fast or to be as smooth and comfortable as a limousine. Similarly, it would be unrealistic to expect teachers working under strict time pressure to produce assessment with the same quality that are dependent of tests made by large national or international testing agency. Equally, large testing agency can be expected to produce assessment that take into account what an individual teacher has chosen to cover in class over the past few weeks. Gown Loud 1989. But what expectation should assesses on the one hand, or user of assessment result on the other have of different types of assessment? And as producer of assessment, what can we do to ensure that assessment we make are as good as they can be, that they are of high quality? According to White 1998, ideas about quality borrowed from business management have become increasingly influential in language education. Two concepts are particularly important to large standard assessment standard and quality management. Sabil 2013. Standard describe desirable characteristics of product and services, such as consistency, environmental friendliness, safety, and economy. When a product or system worked well and safely at an economical cost, it is often because they met predetermined standard quality. Management is a means of achieving and surpassing standard and involve continuous improvement in the effectiveness and efficiency of an organization and the process it carry out. This module we'll look at quality standard for language assessment and the steps that can be taken to mold the principle of continuous improvement into their development and ongoing use. Module 2 show that the concept of assessment include practice that are carried out to meet a very wide variety of different purposes. It is inevitable that high quality should have different meaning for a classroom teacher experimenting with new approach to formative assessment. A program leader has to develop achievement tests for use in a college and Ministry of Education or testing agency, developing a new test for use nationwide. Different use of language assessment are sometimes seen to be mutually incompatible. Tesdale and Leong 2000. Some commentators suggest that large-scale proficient tests and small assessment should each be approached in a different way, the rescue available. In each setting, the kind of information needed and implication of the decision that will be made are centrally quite different. On the other hand, assessment of all kids are about obtaining good quality evidence of assesses knowledge, skill, or abilities. The principles presented in this module are based on the practical advice offered in a range of language assessment textbooks are intended to be relevant across the broad spectrum of language assessment contexts. Projects to develop a new assessment, especially at the classroom or program level, are often seen by those involved as one of linear exercises with clear out beginning and the end points. It is decided that an assessment is needed. The content is settled on front and producer are sketched out, the question or items are written, often within a very tight schedule, or perhaps a test is bought in from a publisher or other external organization. The assessment is administered to a group of learners. Score are awarded, decisions are taken, and certificates are handed out. The work is complete. Sometimes an assessment is used once and then discarded the next time. Everyone start again from the beginning. Sometimes the same assessment is used again and changed even when it has obvious shortcomings. The first of these choice is an obvious and impractical waste of resources, rather like buying a new car each time you need to travel somewhere. The second is irresponsible and potentially dangerous, like buying a new car suspecting there is a serious problem with the brakes. But instead of taking it back to the dealer for investigation and repair, ignoring the problem, continuing to drive around in it. Poor quality assessment practice may not cause physical injury, but they do not produce misleading results and so can have damaging consequences both for assessors and for the people who as the result as a basic for decision. Panham 2001 argued that in addition to the familiar problem of limited resources and lack of time, many teachers suffer from a lack of assessment literacy. They have not received training in basic assessment principle and do not understand how assessment and teaching can complement each other. Konyan 2009 cite a number of shortcomings in teacher-made language assessment that could result from the lack of assessment literacy. Tests made by teachers are often too easy or too difficult for learners, fail to reflect what learners have achieved, and contain content that has not been touched or is not included on the syllabus. Effective assessment comes at a price. Not every institute has the resource to employ the full array of trained language assessment. Professional list by VAC 2009, including specialist assessment writer, psychometrician, or statistician trained in education measurement, and graphic designer. Nonetheless, all institutes certain do have the capacity to improve on their current practice. Formulated, acknowledging a few basic principles can help to develop assessment literacy and improve the quality of practice. This principle can be summed up by the acronym PRICE. Planning and reflection led to improvement when supported by cooperation and informed by evidence. Planning should always be built into the development of any new project. Assessment are no expectation. The more truthful the plans, the better the assessment is likely to be. Reflection and review are fundamental to good quality system. The effectiveness of plan, and current material practices in fulfilling their purpose should constantly be questioned and evaluated. Improvement on current material and practices is always possible and should be the constant aim of any assessment system. Reflection is directed toward making improvement. Cooperation and teamwork are essentially to the development of good assessment material and practices. Share ideas and share criticism and reflection and inform improvement. Evidence is the basis for good decision making. Reflection based on good evidence is much more constructive than prejudiced guesswork as a means of improving quality. Effective record keeping helps everyone involved to understand where produced materials could be made better. Systematic analysis inform effective improvement. Planning, reflection, and improvement. The first three PRICE principles, planning, reflection, and improvement, suggest regular planned review schedule in which current assessments are evaluated and ideas for improvement put forward for integration within the plan for the next time the assessment will be used. These principles do not only apply to locally developed material assessment that has worked well in one location with one group of learners may not work equally well. In another material that is brought in from publisher or external agency should be subject to the same process of critical review as locally developed material. The checklist provided in the next three chapters are intended to help in the process. The last two of the first principle, cooperation and evidence, are the condition required to make planning, reflection, and improvement effective. Cooperation. One cause of poor assessment practice is a mistaken belief that individual expertise or experience can guarantee quality. An experienced teacher is trusted to produce and carry out assessment in a better way than a novice. Although this does not always mean that novice will be given any help with the job. An expert in assessment is assumed to produce better material than a teacher with no specialist training. This may seem reasonable, but even assessment material produced by the most skilled, best trained individual have fault and idiosyncrasies. Where 1993, page 19, stress the point that developing assessment should be a group activity. Individual acting alone are very unlikely to be able to plan, design, and put into practice a really effective assessment system. In fact, teamwork of various kinds is essential to good assessment. First, it is important at the planning stage to agree on a standard that the team will work towards. If individual, teacher, or tester each use very different approach, either in creating assessment or in judging performance, learning can become a disjointed and confusing experience. Davidson and Lynch, 2002, argue that good assessment are developed by consensus rather than by imposition. When people combine their effort and evidence involved has a say in the development of an assessment system, there is a much better chance that it will run successfully and that problem will be minimized if teachers are able to work together to contribute to a shared collection or bank of assessment material. The system can become more efficient as well as more coherent and evident effective. The following chapter of this book suggests ways of organizing and coordinating this shared activity. Another aspect of cooperation is linked to reflection. The word of team member should be checked and repeatedly evaluated. A second opinion on assessment material is always necessary, and having a third or fourth opinion is even better. Someone when a different point of view is often able to spot problem errors that one writer or one scorer may have missed. When possible, classroom teachers should work with their colleagues in regularly reviewing their overall approach to assessment, the specific technique and material they intend to use, and the decision they make when awarding scores. At the program level, enough resources must be made available to follow from regular review of all assessment material and to do research. It should also be kept in mind that effective reflection and review needs a supportive and professional environment in which criticism is objective and is not taken to be personally malicious. As one teacher involved in developing assessment said of the experience of teamwork, I learned to be open to and willing to accept group mates' criticism. Primary school teacher from Hong Kong, quoted by Konomiam, 2009, page 233. Willingness to accept censored criticism is a vital to good quality assessment system. Collecting evidence. A very widespread shortcoming in much assessment practice is paradoxically that the assessment itself often goes unexamined. It is surprisingly rare for assessment user to attempt in any systematic way to find out whether the decision taken based on assessment result where the teacher where the right decision requisition may be taken to guard against obvious disaster questions that are all too difficult for the student test paper, getting lost or stolen recording equipment breaking down, but few people or institution seriously try to answer the important question of whether the assessment has really provided information that is as comprehensive and useful as it could be, and whether things might be done better next time, where the language learners really place into the most appropriate classes on the basic of placement tests, where insight from self-assessment used effectively to improve learning. Following a university entrance test where the best suited people accepted onto the course, where new employers hired after taking a proficient test really able to carry out their work in the foreign language. Adequate answer to question like this will only be founded if evidence is collected rigorously and systematically. However, in many educational systems, apart from score or grades, very little information of any kind is ever collected about assessment. In these circumstances, it is impossible to be confident that an assessment has provided relevant and adequate information about the assesses. Evidence is also important at planning stage, informing the initial design of an assessment. Proficient assessment should be planned on the basis of evidence about how assessors may need to the language in the world beyond the test. In assessing achievement, evidence is needed about what learners have been studying. Developers will additionally need data on wide range of practical issues such as how long it takes to prepare and score the kinds of tasks, investigate how many computer workstation can be made available for an assessment, and so on. As another vital source of evidence, every language assessment handbook insists that material must be tried out or tailored in some ways, particularly if it is to be used in any high-stake assessment, one that leads to decision with serious consequence for assessors. Without compromising the security of any confidential test material, assessors who are as similar as possible to those who will take the operational assessment, that one that will be used as a basis for decision making, are given tasks that are under development. Their responses to each question are recorded and scored, that the results are analyzed statistically to learn whether the material is really capable of providing the kinds of information it is designed to collect. Report about the experience collected from test takers and those involved in administering the assessment can also help in identifying problem. Statistical analysis play particularly important role in the practice of language assessment, particularly in the support of formal testing. At learn a basic understanding of statistics is needed to understand how tests are made and how results should be interpreted. A short overview of key techniques and their application can be found on the website that accompanies this book. Fuller treatments are to be found in Bachman 2004 and Brown 2005. During the initial development of an assessment, the focus is on the types of tasks that will be used. Does this task format work? Do the tasks elicit useful information about the assessors? The term vary, but this trailing process is sometimes called piloting. Anderson et al. 1995, page 74. When the system is in operation, the focus is on fresh material that will go into new form of assessment. Are these particularly questions good example of the established type? Do they provide the same kind of information as the prototype task? This trailing process is sometimes called pretesting. Anderson et al. 1995, page 74. In addition to the piloting of task type and presenting of new material, after each administration of an operational test assessment, this should always be a process of reflection or item and assessment review, so that lesson can be learned and improvement made. When the intention are not stated or understood, procedure not consistently followed, and evidence not carefully collected, it is impossible to tell just how good or bad an assessment has been at fulfilling its purpose. Although experience suggests that the quality is likely to be very poor. If nobody explains just what the assessment is supposed to measure, it is impossible to judge whether or not it has been successful. in measuring or capturing anything meaningful. If nobody keeps a record of the answer that assesses gave to each question, it becomes impossible to tell whether some of the questions are problematic. If nobody provides guidance on which answer can be accepted and which are incorrect, when different people score an assessment, each one may judge the same answer differently. If nobody set out how much time each assessor should be allowed or what sources of help they can use, some of unfairly be given more time or receive more help than others. In these circumstances, in the absence of standard for language assessment, the result may be meaningless and so cannot be useful. Practices will certainly need improvement, but without evidence, it will not be clear how this should be improved. The assessment cycle. When improvement in such assessment and assessment system should not be seen just as product such as tests or as event such as a role plays or 1 hour written examination or event as a series of linked events that led to a decision about the assesses. Instead, assessment should be viewed as continuous and repeating cycle of activities. The process does not end when a decision about an assessment is made, but can be modified and improvement before the cycle begin again. The next time around, the quality of assessment will be better. Within the overall cycle, it is useful to identify a sequence of activities, each associated with a particular function or role. Each role may be carried out by a different person or group of people, and some may even be carried out automatically by machines. On the other hand, one person or group may carry out at several rules. In large-scale assessment program, each activity will involve detailed documentation so that different groups of individuals can coordinate their contribution. Teachers, especially if working more or less independently on classroom assessment, will not be able to keep such extensive record, but will need to consider efficient ways of keeping track of and communicating the progress that their students are making in their learning, how well their approach has worked, and how their assessment fit into an overall school program. Breaking down the cycle into the different stages involved can help them to do this. Figure 3.1 represent the different roles involved in the assessment cycle and the various documents used to record each stage. The rules and their associated documents are discussed in the paragraph that follow. Stage 1. Designers, Objective, and Specification. As we saw in Module 1 and as Hodge 2003, page 59, instead, the essential first step in assessment is to make oneself perfectly clear about what it is one want to know and for what purpose. Culture 2010 compare the designer of an assessment to the architect of a house. The architect begins with an understanding of the purpose of the building that he or she is going to design, considered among other things the location and the available budget, and turns this into plan for the construction of the building. The architect provides detailed drawing and instruction for the builders. This plan include the material to be used, the free price, layout of the room, and so on. Future 3.1. The assessment cycle, roles, responsibilities, and documentation. Just as the architect needs to know before beginning the design whether the building is intended as a family home or a shopping center, the designer of assessment need to be clear about the decision or decision the assessment is intended to inform. Many assessment projects fail before they begin because too little attention is given to what the people who will use the result to make decision. The assessment user really need to know about the assesses. Often, at the outset, the user themselves may not be very clear about what kind of information they really need. This reinforces the need for cooperation. The designer of the assessment will need to consult understanding of the intended purpose. From the outset, as a part of the planning process, it is necessary to define who will be involved in each stage of delivery and administration, and to take account of their views in developing the assessment. Architects do not, of course, begin from nothing. They can draw on centuries of human experience in constructing home, office, shop, and factories, and long-standing knowledge of traditional building material and technique. In making their plan, they can combine the established tradition with innovation such as newly developed material and new ideas for design. Similarly, good assessment design will have an understand of what they believe, language ability, or whatever else is being assessed consists of, and of how this relevant to the context in which assessment will be used, the particularly purpose and particular population of assessors they have in mind. They will know how language abilities has been assessed by others in the past, or how they are assessed in other contexts. They will be aware of the effect that the use of different techniques available may have on those involved. The designer of formative classroom assessment system need understanding of how language are learned and how best to use the information from an assessment to, to guide ongoing learning. The issue of what should be assessed or measured by language assessment. The assessment construct has naturally been the center of a great deal of debate between people who favor one approach or another. Part 3 will look at the impact that some of the different theoretical approach to defining construction have had on language assessment design. As one means of ensuring a coherent system with consistent result, it is important that the procedure followed in making a useful product or carrying out a project can be repeated. The steps in the process have to be recorded rigorously enough to make replication possible. This also helps in identifying the likely source of any problem when they do occur. According to the purpose and formality of the assessment, different aspects of the content and administration may need to be more or less strictly replicable. Large-scale tests are often standardized. Both the content of the test and the condition for administration are carefully delineated and controlled so that each assessor will have the same test-taking experience. For reason of security, the same question can be used every time a test is given to avoid this different form set of assessment material that follow exactly the same design but include different content produced. These are intended to be similar enough to give comparable results when the assessment is given to different groups of people at different times and at different places. Assessors who score 57% on Form A of a test should also score very close to 57% on Form B if two forms include very different material and are administered under different conditions. The result will not be directly comparable. In many cases of formative assessment, standardization is unnecessary and could be counterproductive as teachers may wish to adjust procedure according to the need of their student. Nonetheless, some degree of replication is important even for informal classroom questioning and self-assessment. The successful use of formative assessment depends on embedding regular procedure in the classroom. Teachers need to have a consistent approach to questioning and feedback so that students become familiar with the technique and understanding how to benefit from the learner need to be trained to follow set process if they are going to be effective at self and first assessment. The descriptive reporting of results need to be carried out consistently so that user can develop a clear understanding of their meaning. Specification, the key document that communicate standard and guide how an assessment is to be produced, administered, and replicated is known as the specification. The specification set out the plan for collecting observable evidence that will inform judgment about how much knowledge, skill, or ability a learner has connecting theoretical understanding of language with the decision that the user will make about the assesses. Specification typically include three elements: a designer statement, an assessment blueprint, and task specifications. The designer statement, when considering the design of a new assessment or of an approach to assessment with the school curriculum, it is important for those involved to begin by considering, discussing, and collectively answering some fundamental questions. Large-scale assessment program will document the answer to questions such as this in the form of what Bachman and Palmer 2010, page 143, called a design statement, and Folder and Davidson 2009, page 123, called a statement of test purpose. The design statement usually comes at the beginning of the specification and set out the designer understanding of the purpose of the assessment, the decision to be made, stakeholder affected by the decision and involved responsible for making the decision. Fulcher and Davidson 2009, page 270. It provides a definition of assessment, construct a description of the assessors, and an explanation of way the approach adopted by the design is appropriate. Classroom teacher will not need to publish a design statement for each assessment they use in class, but they will nonetheless need to have a clear understanding of the topical justification for the content, what theories of language and proficiency underpin the test, and why the test is the why. It is Anderson et al. 1995, page 10. And this is a true for other form of assessment, as it is for tests within testing program, an explicit statement of the overall approach to assessment and its relationship to learning should be included among the key curriculum document. Blueprint, just as builder need detailed plans or blueprint in order to construct a building, so those involved in preparing an assessment need more than a design statement if they are going to produce material that matches what the designer intended. Assessment blueprint include clear statement about what content is to be covered, what methods are to be used, how many paper or sector they are, how long the test taker, and so on. And Alderson et al. 1995, page 10.